The text message came at 3:47 a.m. The insurance policy is in place. We move tomorrow. It wasn't meant for me. My name is Marcus Rivera, and 48 hours ago, I was a dead man walking who just didn't know it yet. Not because of cancer, not because of some freak accident, but because my own flesh and blood had already picked out my casket and were counting the zeros in my life insurance payout. You want to know what 23 years of building an empire gets you? A son who sees you as a retirement plan, and a daughter who's already redecorating your office in her head. I used to carry their baby pictures in my wallet. Now I carry a recording that would destroy them both. Let me paint you a picture of my last normal day. December 23rd, 2024, Christmas Eve's Eve. I'm in my study, Manhattan twinkling below like scattered diamonds, wrapping presents for the grandkids I thought I'd watch grow up. Sarah's 8-year-old laugh echoing from the living room. Tommy asking if Grandpa's really the richest man in New York. That's when I saw it. My son David's phone, forgotten on my desk after our budget meeting. The screen lit up with messages that made my blood turn to ice water. Messages between him and my daughter Elena about life insurance beneficiaries, funeral arrangements, and something called the accident. Dad's morning jog route never changes, 6 a.m. sharp through Central Park. A mugging gone wrong. These things happen in New York. Have you ever read your own death sentence written by the people you'd take a bullet for? I sat there for 3 hours scrolling through months of planning. Every family dinner, every hug, every "I love you, Dad," all lies wrapped around a countdown to my murder. They'd been playing the long game, waiting for the perfect moment when my will was updated and their alibis were airtight. But here's what they didn't count on. The old man still had some fight left in him. What you're about to hear over the next 10 chapters isn't just my story. It's a survival manual for anyone who's ever wondered if the people closest to them see dollar signs instead of a human being. This is about the moment I stopped being a victim and became a hunter. And trust me, when you've built an empire from nothing, you learn a thing or two about destroying your enemies, even when they share your last name. I should have died on Christmas morning. Instead, I'm here talking to you. And my children? Well, they're about to learn that their father didn't build a fortune by being naive. If this story is making your stomach turn because it hits too close to home, hit that like button. Let me know I'm not alone in this nightmare. Drop a comment if you've ever felt that sick feeling that someone close to you is playing a longer game than you realized. And subscribe, because what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty and survival instincts. I should have died on Christmas morning. Instead, I'm here talking to you. And my children? Well, they're about to learn that their father didn't build a fortune by being naive. If this story is making your stomach turn because it hits too close to home, hit that like button. Let me know I'm not alone in this nightmare. Drop a comment if you've ever felt that sick feeling that someone close to you is playing a longer game than you realized. And subscribe, because what happens next will make you question everything you think you know about family loyalty and survival instincts. Chapter 1 starts with a funeral. The question is, whose? Sometimes the only way to save your life is to destroy theirs first. The funeral home smelled like lilies and lies. Standing there in my custom-tailored black suit, watching the mourners file past the mahogany casket, I couldn't help but smile. After all, this was supposed to be my funeral, not David's. 3 days ago, I was gift-wrapping Sarah's bicycle in my study, humming along to Bing Crosby drifting from the living room. Elena was making hot chocolate for the kids, her laughter mixing with Tommy's excited chatter about Santa. It was the kind of scene you'd find on a Christmas card. Perfect family, perfect home, perfect lie. That's when David's phone buzzed on my desk. The screen lit up with a message from someone called The Cleaner. Insurance confirmed. Christmas morning. Make it look random. My hands trembled as I scrolled through months of messages. My son, my flesh and blood, had been planning my death like a business transaction. The details were meticulous. My morning jog route, the exact spot where Central Park's cameras had a blind spot, even the type of weapon that would suggest a botched robbery. But the worst part? Elena's response. Finally, I'm tired of pretending to care about his boring investment stories. I sat there for hours, watching my family through the doorway. Sarah climbed onto David's lap, and he kissed her forehead with the same lips that had been planning her grandfather's murder. Elena helped Tommy reach the angel for the tree, her gentle hands that had just typed messages about body disposal. 23 years I'd spent building Rivera Industries from a small construction company to a billion-dollar empire. I'd missed birthday parties, school plays, bedtime stories, all so my children could have everything I never had, and this was their gratitude. By midnight, I'd made my decision. If my children wanted to play games with death, I'd teach them the rules. After all, you don't build an empire by being squeamish about destroying obstacles. The next morning, I changed my jogging route for the first time in 5 years. David died exactly the way he'd planned to kill me, a mugging gone wrong in Central Park. Poetic justice, some might call it. I called it Tuesday. The police found him at 6:15 a.m., wallet missing, phone smashed, lying in the same spot where they'd intended to find my body. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in the hospital morgue, identifying my son's corpse while Elena sobbed into her husband's shoulder. "He was just trying to get in shape for the new year," she wailed. "Who does this to someone on Christmas morning?" I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I placed a comforting hand on her back and whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll find whoever did this." The funeral arrangements were a masterpiece of manipulation. I played the grieving father perfectly. Tears at appropriate moments, angry outbursts about the city's crime rate, touching eulogies about David's promising future. Elena ate it up, probably already calculating how much of David's inheritance would flow to her. What she didn't know was that I'd been busy those 3 days between Christmas and the funeral. A lifetime of building business relationships teaches you that everyone has a price, and sometimes that price is surprisingly low. The cleaner, for instance, was surprisingly reasonable when I offered him double what David had paid, with a slight modification to the target. I'd also made some interesting discoveries about my children's finances. David's gambling debts were astronomical, hidden behind shell companies and cryptocurrency transactions. Elena's husband had been embezzling from his law firm for years, and she'd been helping him launder the money through art purchases. My children weren't just planning patricide, they were drowning in secrets that would destroy them anyway. I was simply accelerating the timeline. Standing beside David's grave, watching dirt fall onto his casket, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete control. For 23 years, I'd been reactive, building walls to protect a family that saw me as an ATM. Now I was dictating the game. Elena squeezed my hand as we walked away from the cemetery. "At least we have each other, Dad." "Yes," I replied, squeezing back. "At least we do." 2 weeks after David's funeral, Elena made her move. She arrived at my penthouse with legal documents and crocodile tears, playing the role of concerned daughter with Oscar-worthy precision. "Dad, I've been thinking about David's death, and I'm worried about your safety," she said, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. "Maybe it's time you considered stepping back from the company. You know, enjoy retirement while you can." The papers she placed before me were a work of art, power of attorney documents that would transfer control of Rivera Industries to her, along with access to my personal accounts for simplified estate management. She'd even included psychological evaluations suggesting I might be suffering from grief-induced cognitive decline. I pretended to read through them carefully while she continued her performance. I know this seems sudden, but after losing David, I realized how fragile life is. I want to take care of you, Dad. Let me handle the business stress so you can focus on healing. What Elena didn't know was that I'd been recording every conversation since David's death. The digital recorder hidden in my desk drawer had captured hours of her phone calls with her husband, discussing how to expedite my mental breakdown and questioning whether David's death might have been a blessing in disguise. "You know, sweetie," I said, setting down the documents, "you're absolutely right about life being fragile." I pressed play on my laptop. Elena's voice filled the room. "David was always too impatient. If we're smart about this, Dad's grief will make him easier to manipulate. A few more weeks of playing the devoted daughter, and he'll sign anything I put in front of him." The color drained from Elena's face as her own words condemned her. She tried to stand, but I'd already activated the building's security protocols. The doors were locked, the elevators frozen, and my security team had instructions to detain anyone trying to leave my floor. "Sit down, Elena." My voice carried the authority that had built empires and crushed competitors. "We need to talk about your brother's insurance policy." Her hands shook as she realized the game was over. "Dad, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. "I already know about the embezzlement, the gambling debts, and your interesting choice of friends in organized crime. The question is, do you want to join David, or would you prefer federal prison? Have you ever wondered how far someone would go to destroy you for money? How many lies they'd tell while looking you in the eye and calling you family?" Elena chose prison. Smart girl. Unlike her brother, she understood that I wasn't bluffing. The FBI raid on her home 3 days later was spectacular. They found evidence of money laundering, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. The media had a field day. "Billionaire's daughter arrested in murder plot." The headlines wrote themselves. I visited her in holding before her arraignment, playing the heartbroken father one last time. She looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, her perfectly styled blonde hair now stringy and unkempt. The woman who'd planned to inherit my empire was reduced to a number in the system. "Why?" she whispered when I sat across from her in the visitation room. "Why didn't you just die like we planned?" The honesty was almost refreshing. No more pretense, no more loving daughter act, just raw admission of her murderous intent. "Because, sweetheart, you forgot the most important lesson I ever tried to teach you," I replied. "Always know who you're dealing with before you try to destroy them." I pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Did you really think I'd spent 23 years building an empire without learning how to protect it? Every business deal, every partnership, every relationship, I've always had contingency plans." Her face crumpled as I showed her the evidence I'd compiled over the months. Not just the murder conspiracy, but years of theft, lies, and betrayal. Bank records showing money stolen from the children's trust funds. Photos of her meetings with David's gambling contacts. Even recordings of her laughing with friends about how naive her stupid old father was. "I kept hoping you'd come back to me," I continued, my voice steady despite the pain cutting through my chest. "I told myself the greed was temporary, that underneath it all, you were still my little girl who used to fall asleep on my lap during board meetings." Elena's tears weren't calculated this time. They were real, raw, and 20 years too late. "But you know what the worst part is?" I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You were never even good at being evil. David at least had the spine to try killing me himself. You were going to let him do your dirty work, then probably plan his accident next." Her sharp intake of breath confirmed what I'd suspected. Elena hadn't just wanted me dead. She'd intended to eliminate David too, eventually. She'd planned to be the sole heir to the Rivera fortune, surrounded by the bodies of her family. 25 to life, I said, standing to leave. "That's what the prosecutor is asking for. I hope it was worth it." The hardest part wasn't destroying my children. It was explaining to Sarah and Tommy why Mommy and Uncle David wouldn't be coming home. 8-year-old Sarah sat on my lap in the same chair where I'd discovered their parents' murder plot, her small hands clutching the stuffed elephant I'd bought her for Christmas. Tommy, barely 6, was building blocks on the floor, occasionally looking up to ask when Daddy was coming back from his business trip. How do you tell children that their parents are monsters? That the bedtime stories and goodnight kisses were performed by people who saw murder as a financial strategy? That their inheritance was supposed to be built on their grandfather's grave? "Grandpa, why are you crying?" Sarah's innocent question cut through me like glass. I wasn't aware I had been. For months, I'd been focused on survival, on revenge, on justice. I'd forgotten that in destroying my children, I was also destroying these innocent lives who'd never asked to be born into this nightmare. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices," I whispered, holding her tighter. "And sometimes those choices hurt the people who love them most." The custody battle was swift. With Elena in prison and David dead, I was the only family they had left. Social services questioned whether a 70-year-old billionaire could properly care for 2 traumatized children. But money talks louder than concerns about age. I moved them into the penthouse, converting David's old room into a playground and Elena's former office into a nursery. The same walls that had witnessed murder plots now echoed with children's laughter. The irony was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Tommy started having nightmares about bad men taking Daddy away. Sarah stopped eating, asking repeatedly when Mommy would call. I found myself becoming the parent I'd never been to my own children. Present, patient, protective. The grandfather who read bedtime stories and checked under beds for monsters, never telling them that the real monsters had been the people tucking them in. At night, after they fell asleep, I'd sit in my study and wonder if this was my punishment or my redemption. I'd eliminated the threats to my life, but in doing so, I'd made myself responsible for the collateral damage. 2 innocent souls who would grow up knowing their parents had tried to murder their grandfather. The psychiatrist I hired for them said recovery would take years, maybe decades. Trauma this severe leaves scars that never fully heal. But watching Sarah smile when I helped her with homework, or hearing Tommy laugh at my terrible jokes, I realized something profound. Maybe this was what I'd been fighting for all along. Not just survival, but the chance to love someone without condition, without fear, without calculation. When you're forced to choose between your survival and innocent hearts being broken, how do you live with the choice that keeps you breathing? 6 months after Elena's conviction, the nightmares started. Not mine. I slept like a baby knowing my enemies were neutralized. The nightmares belonged to Sarah and Tommy, and they were killing me slowly. Sarah would wake up screaming for her mother at 3 a.m., the same time I'd discovered that first text message. Tommy stopped speaking for 3 weeks, communicating only through drawings that his therapist described as concerning expressions of abandonment anxiety. The same little boy who used to ask if I was really the richest man in New York now flinched when I tried to hug him. I'd hired the best child psychologists money could buy, but trauma doesn't respond to wealth. Dr. Martinez explained that children need consistency, security, and most importantly, truth adapted to their developmental level. But how do you give a 6-year-old the truth about murder and greed without destroying what's left of their innocence? The penthouse felt different with children's voices echoing through it. Rooms that once hosted million-dollar business deals now had toys scattered across imported marble floors. The conference table, where I'd planned hostile takeovers, was now covered with coloring books and juice boxes. I found myself learning things I'd never bothered with as a younger father. How to braid Sarah's hair, badly. Why Tommy needed his nightlight, because darkness scared him now. The difference between a scraped knee that needed Band-Aids and one that just needed Grandpa's attention. But the hardest moments were when they asked questions I couldn't answer honestly. "Grandpa, why did Mommy leave us?" Sarah's question came during breakfast one Tuesday morning. She was stirring her cereal, not eating, the way she'd done every day since Elena's arrest. I set down my coffee, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, sweetheart, people make choices that mean they can't be with the people they love anymore. Did she choose to leave us? The truth would have destroyed her. Yes, she chose money over your safety. She chose to kill me rather than wait for her inheritance. She chose to risk making you orphans for financial gain. Instead, I said, she's somewhere where she needs to learn how to make better choices. Tommy looked up from his blocks. Are you going to leave us too, Grandpa? The question hit me harder than David's first punch as a teenager, harder than Elena's betrayal, harder than learning my own children wanted me dead. Because for the first time in my life, leaving wasn't an option. These children had lost everything: parents, security, the basic trust that adults would protect them. I was all they had left. Never, I promised, kneeling to his eye level. I will never leave you, not ever. By their first Christmas without parents, Sarah and Tommy had stopped asking when Mommy and Daddy were coming home. The questions evolved into something worse, the dawning awareness that something terrible had happened, something beyond their understanding but within their intuition. I'd planned a perfect Christmas, professional decorators, mountains of presents, even snow machines on the terrace to create a winter wonderland. But money can't buy back stolen innocence or repair the damage done by genetic betrayal. Sarah found me in my study Christmas Eve, holding the same photo that had once shown David's phone. Now it displayed a picture from last Christmas, Elena laughing as she helped Tommy reach the tree angel, David lifting Sarah to place the star on top. A perfect family portrait hiding murderous hearts. They look happy, she said, climbing onto my lap like she used to with David. They did, I admitted, because lying to her felt like another betrayal. Were they pretending? The question took my breath away. 8 years old, and she'd grasped what it had taken me decades to understand, that love could be performance, that family could be fiction, that the people supposed to protect you might be the ones planning your destruction. I think, I said carefully, they loved you and Tommy very much, but sometimes adults make terrible choices that hurt the people they love. Like you hurt them? Children see everything. I'd been so focused on protecting them from the truth about their parents that I'd forgotten they might recognize my role in their parents' absence. Yes, I whispered, like I hurt them. Sarah was quiet for a long time, tracing patterns on my shirt with her finger. Finally, she asked, "Did you have to hurt them to keep us safe?" The sophistication of the question stunned me. Somewhere in her trauma and therapy and sleepless nights, my granddaughter had assembled the pieces of a puzzle too complex for most adults. She understood that sometimes survival requires terrible choices, that love sometimes wears the face of destruction. Yes, sweetheart, I did. Okay, she said simply, then fell asleep in my arms. That night, I called Dr. Martinez. She knows, I told him. Not everything, but enough. Children are remarkably resilient, he replied, and sometimes they understand justice better than we think. The question is, what will you do with that understanding? I looked down at Sarah, peaceful for the first time in months, and realized she'd given me something I hadn't expected: forgiveness from the innocent for protecting the innocent. Tommy might not understand yet, but Sarah had grasped the impossible choice I'd faced: destroy my children or watch them destroy us all. 2 years after Elena's sentencing, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including myself. I retired from Rivera Industries. Not to enjoy golden years on a beach somewhere, but to become a full-time grandfather to 2 children who'd taught me more about love than 23 years of marriage and parenthood ever had. The board thought I'd lost my mind. The media speculated about early-onset dementia. Wall Street analysts predicted the company's collapse. But for the first time in my adult life, I didn't care about other people's opinions. Sarah and Tommy needed stability more than I needed corporate validation. We moved out of the Manhattan penthouse. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of Christmas plans that became murder plots. Instead, I bought a house in Westchester with a backyard big enough for a swing set and bedrooms close enough that nightmares could be soothed quickly. Tommy started speaking again, gradually at first, then in the torrents typical of 6-year-olds discovering the world isn't as dangerous as they'd feared. He'd follow me around the house, chattering about everything and nothing, as if making up for months of silence. His favorite topic became my stories about building the company, but edited for a child's ears. Adventures in problem-solving rather than corporate warfare. Sarah blossomed in school once we found the right environment. The expensive private academy in Manhattan had been too much pressure. Too many whispered conversations from other parents who recognized the Rivera name. The public elementary school in Westchester treated her like any other kid whose parents weren't around much. When classmates asked where her mom and dad were, she'd learned to say simply, "They had to go away. I live with Grandpa now." I learned to cook. Not just ordering from restaurants, but actually standing in a kitchen, making pancakes that came out lopsided and sandwiches cut into perfect triangles because that's how Sarah liked them. I attended parent-teacher conferences, school plays, and soccer games where I cheered louder than appropriate for a dignified billionaire grandfather. The money was always there. I'd structured my retirement to ensure generational wealth, but it had stopped being the point. When Sarah needed help with homework, she came to me, not a tutor. When Tommy had bad dreams, he climbed into my bed, not a nanny's. For the first time in decades, I was needed for who I was, not what I could provide. Dr. Martinez called it reparative parenting, the chance to give these children what I'd failed to give their parents. But it felt more like salvation than therapy. Every laugh, every scraped knee I bandaged, every bedtime story I read was healing something broken in my own soul. 3 years into our new life, Tommy found the box.
I'd hidden it in the attic, behind Christmas decorations and old photo albums, a simple cardboard container holding the evidence that had destroyed his parents. The recordings, the photographs, the bank statements that proved conspiracy and murder. I'd kept it all, partly for legal protection, partly as a reminder of how close I'd come to being the one in a grave. But 9-year-old boys are curious creatures, and Tommy had been exploring while I worked in the garden. He brought the box downstairs with the solemnity of a child who knows he's found something significant, even if he doesn't understand what. "Grandpa, is this about Mommy and Daddy?" My blood turned to ice. Sarah, now 11, looked up from her homework, sensing the tension in my silence. I took the box from Tommy's small hands, my mind racing through options. Lie? Distract? Continue the careful fiction we'd built around their parents' absence? But looking at their faces, older now, wiser, marked by years of therapy and questions I'd deflected, I realized they deserved more than protection. They deserved truth. We sat in the living room where I'd wrapped their Christmas presents that last normal night. I opened the box slowly, removing the least damaging items first. Bank statements, legal documents, things that looked important but weren't immediately horrifying. "Your parents," I began, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest, "were planning to hurt me, very badly, and I had to make a choice between protecting myself and protecting them." Sarah's hand found Tommy's. Even at 9, he understood that some adult conversations change everything. I showed them the evidence carefully, explaining in age-appropriate terms what conspiracy meant, why people sometimes choose money over family, how sometimes loving someone means stopping them from doing terrible things. "They were going to kill you?" Sarah's voice was smaller than I'd heard it in months. "They were going to try." Tommy's next question destroyed me. Did they love us at all? I pulled both children close, feeling their small bodies trembling against the weight of ultimate betrayal. They loved you more than anything in the world. But sometimes adults make choices that don't make sense, even to people who love them. We cried together that afternoon, the first tears I'd shed since reading David's messages 3 years earlier. Not tears of grief or anger, but tears of release. The truth was finally complete between us. That night, Sarah came to my room before bed. "Grandpa, I'm glad you didn't let them hurt you." "Why, sweetheart?"
Because then who would take care of us? 5 years have passed since that Christmas morning that changed everything. Sarah is 16 now, captain of her debate team and already talking about law school. Tommy is 14, building robots in our garage and explaining quantum physics concepts I pretend to understand. They know the whole truth now, not the sanitized version I gave them as children, but the complete story of murder, betrayal, and survival. They've read the transcripts, seen the evidence, understood the impossible choices that saved their grandfather's life and, consequently, their own futures. Last week, Sarah asked if she could visit Elena in prison. The request caught me off guard. I'd assumed they'd want nothing to do with the woman who'd planned their grandfather's death and abandoned them for money. But teenagers are complex creatures, driven by needs for closure that adults often can't foresee. "Why?" I asked. "Because she's still my mother," Sarah replied, "and I need her to know who I became despite what she did." We went together, Sarah, Tommy, and I, walking into the federal penitentiary where Elena had spent the last 5 years. She looked older, grayer, diminished by institutional life and the weight of her choices. Elena cried when she saw them, real tears this time, not the calculated manipulation I remembered. Prison had stripped away her ability to perform, leaving only raw regret and the devastating awareness of what she'd lost. "I'm sorry," she whispered to children who'd grown up without her. "I'm so sorry." Sarah, poised and confident in a way that reminded me of myself at her age, looked at her mother steadily. "I know you are, but sorry doesn't change anything. You chose money over family. You chose greed over love. You chose to leave us." Tommy, quieter but no less firm, added, "Grandpa chose us. Every day for 5 years, he's chosen us. That's the difference between you and him." We left after 30 minutes. Elena aged a decade in that half hour, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd destroyed. My grandchildren walked out taller, stronger, freed from the last chains of parental abandonment. Tonight, I'm in my study. Not the Manhattan penthouse where I discovered their parents' betrayal, but the comfortable home office where I help with homework and listen to teenage problems. On my desk are photos from Sarah's Sweet 16 party last month, Tommy's science fair victory, ordinary family moments that mean more than any corporate acquisition ever did. I built an empire to leave my children. Instead, I destroyed my children to save my grandchildren. The irony isn't lost on me, but neither is the profound peace I've found in choosing love over legacy, survival over sentiment, truth over the comfortable lies families tell themselves. If you're watching this, maybe you recognize something in my story. Maybe you've wondered about the people closest to you, questioned motivations you'd rather not examine. Trust your instincts. Love doesn't require blindness, and family doesn't guarantee loyalty. Hit that like button if this story reminded you that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to make impossible choices to protect yourself or the people you love? And subscribe, because stories like this need to be told. Sometimes survival looks like destruction, but from the ashes, we can build something better. My name is Marcus Rivera. I was supposed to die 5 years ago. Instead, I learned to live. The truth doesn't always set you free, but it gives you the power to choose your own prison.